introduce my very good friend, Dr. Andrew Golde. I first met him as a patient. I was the patient, he was the doctor. Since then, he's treated me for half a dozen sinus infections and at least 3 sinus surgeries. I still can't breathe.
I can't operate, no worries.
Dr. Golde is a board certified, pronounce it for me.
Otolaryngologist.
Whatever that is. It's an ENT doctor. Okay. He's practiced in Atlanta for 29 years. He's assistant clinical professor, ENT at Medical College of Georgia and at Northside Hospital. And he also is, in some capacity, aviation medical examiner for the FAA. He's a very good physician, but he claims to be a lousy woodworker.
Very true. Very true.
And I just asked him, he was a guild member. We don't know for sure whether he still is or not. He doesn't know, so I didn't look it up. Anyway, we don't have another giveaway for this, but he's going to offer a huge discount on hearing aids. Because that's what he's going to talk about is hearing loss from shop tools. In preparation for this, my Apple Watch has a decibel meter on it. And I prepared a list of all the tools I have in my shop and the noise output of each one of them. And I don't know how you're going to use it, if at all.
Oh, it's up there.
Okay. All right. So my tools may not be the same as your tools. I encourage you to.
That's a problem for your urologist, not for the.
All right. I'm seeing him next week anyway.
Yeah, and I'm in trouble next week.
So anyway, please welcome Dr. Andrew Golde.
Want to pop that thing on?
Yeah. I can either do that or hold the magic stick. There we go. There we go. All right, you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. It is an absolute pleasure to be here, and I wanted to thank Jim for asking me to come along. Gary, I didn't know you remember. I know we talk shop all the time when you're in my office as well. So I just a couple of comments. John Champion, where are you? Oh, he is. Yeah, no, I'm going to make fun of him anyway. He can come in if yeah. I think that applies to most of us. I was going to tell John that you know his numbers look very, very good on the budget, but he still hasn't gotten. Hey, I like the way you presented the budget for all of that, John, but you haven't gotten my bill for the speaking fee for tonight, so your numbers are totally screwed up. Okay. Well, you'll get my bill for 24 then in that case. Question for all the members present here. How many are military veterans? That's a big proportion. Thank you. Thank you for your service. How many of you guys use recreational firearms on a regular basis? Also a big proportion. The NRA thanks you, I'm assuming. And how many of you guys are woodworkers? Oh, it's just checking. The reason that I was interested in talking about the noise created by power tools is an awful lot of patients come to see me for issues related to hearing loss. And I'll make a blanket statement for most of the gentlemen in this room. It's usually your spouse that's complaining about your hearing. It's not you guys yourselves. Hearing loss happens to every single one of us. It's basically genetically predetermined as to how quickly we're going to lose our hearing. Thank you, mother. Thank you, father, for all of that. But there's an awful lot that we do ourselves during our daily lives or our careers that can really accelerate the onset of your hearing becoming worse. So I was curious when Jim proposed to me, he said, hey, let's figure out how much power tools can potentially contribute to hearing related issues. Most of what I see are people who've been in the military or use guns routinely and don't wear hearing protection. And in the military, their hearing protection was basically zero. And even all the latest series of earplugs and stuff that most of our active combatants where really aren't worth a flip. So noise-induced hearing loss is a big, big, big issue. Other people I see a lot are those who work in heavy industry where there's a lot of noise exposure from machinery and engines, et cetera. OSHA, or the Occupational Safety Health Association, has a lot to do with trying to monitor, those workers and prevent hearing loss there. But it's a very, very common problem. So let's get into a little bit of the ideas of how we hear, what causes hearing loss, and then there's some interesting numbers that Jim was able to provide. I also looked up a bunch of stuff from industrial publications as to what kind of equipment produced what levels of noise. And we'll talk about what each different level of noise can do in terms of damaging our hearing, in terms of decibels or loudness, and just the time of exposure being a very, very important factor. So let's go to the next one if we can. Back one, please. And forward one. Okay, ear anatomy, good enough. I had no idea how big this slide was going to be, but very, very simply, how do we hear? A sound is just a pressure wave that vibrates in the air at a given frequency, and it travels into your ear canal and it hits your eardrum, and it makes your eardrum vibrate at exactly that same frequency. Your eardrum then is connected by 3 little bones of hearing that act like lever arms, and they transmit that vibration deep inside your skull through a series of little openings to your inner ear or cochlea. Your cochlea or inner ear is just a computer. All it does, it creates an electrical signal from the vibration, transmits that signal through a series of nerves to your brain where you actually hear the sound. So we process sound in our ears, but we hear it in our brains. Okay, and a lot of people just think we hear in our ears. The ears are just a processing mechanism. And the most fragile part of that mechanism is actually the little computer called your cochlea. Okay, and your cochlea basically sends its signal off of wires to the mainframe, which is your brain. But all of us over our lifetimes will be experiencing some kind of an insult or injury to the cochlea itself. Yeah, you can be a bozo and stick a Q-tip in your ear and puncture your eardrum, or you can have infections, behind your eardrums. That's really uncommon percentage-wise compared to the damage and deterioration that we see in your inner ear. So let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so, what kind of sounds actually cause hearing loss? Well, very common. We have just a single explosive kind of a sound, like a gunshot or a firecracker that explodes nearby. You can also have fire engine sirens, car horns, for example, if you're standing very, very close to them outside your vehicle. Repeated exposures to loud sounds, that's another very important thing. You're working in a machine shop, okay? You're in industry, and you're exposed to a ton of equipment that's doing that for you. The 2 factors that we mentioned a little bit earlier are the degree of loudness measured in decibels and the duration of exposure. Sometimes it just takes a split second, but usually we're exposed more in the minutes to hours to days, weeks, months kind of a time frame. And I wanted to look at how this applies to us in our woodworking shops. Next slide, please. All right, so when we look at common sources of noise, it's important to understand what these decibel ratings are all about. Everyone thinks that a decibel is a linear measurement. So when people come in and I'm going through their hearing test results with them, they go, "Hey doc, what percentage of hearing loss do I have?" Percentages don't really apply to the scale that we use in decibels because it's a logarithmic scale. It goes up by powers of 10. So percentages are kind of a complete misnomer. So when you look at decibels, a normal breath measures 10 dB. Absence of sound is 0. So just breathing is 10. A whisper is 30. Normal conversation that we're having in the room really is approximately 60 decibels. So background noise in here when we're all kind of, humming and buzzing before all these, presentations got going. I had a decibel meter out on my phone, and we were hitting somewhere around the 65 to 70 dB range. And we'll talk about what that actually can do to our hearing. A washing machine, 70 dB if you have some fairly recent machinery. Leaf blowers and lawnmowers. You'll see these guys out there, using their gas-powered leaf blowers. Smart guys have the $20 earmuffs from Home Depot. over the ears, because we're already getting to 85 dB. And the numbers on the right-hand column on either screen reflect over what time frame at those decibel ratings we can expect damage to our inner ear or cochlea. So if you're leaf blowing for 2 hours, basically, you can expect potentially at least some temporary shifts in how well your inner ears are working. You do that over and over and over again, you're going to start to damage your ears. And we'll talk about whose ears are more fragile than other people's. Let's get to a motorcycle, call it a Harley for lack of a better term. Less than an hour of exposure to that noise level unprotected, you're damaging your cochlea. Nightclubs and rock concerts, okay? We've all been to those at one time or another, and takes just a couple of minutes. A siren, if you're standing really close by and somebody blasts you with it, less than a couple of minutes. Firecrackers and gunshots. How many of us stood next to a gun blast shooting birds, and some bozo just decides to swing right past you and boom, and your ear just goes boo. Next thing you're just hearing, a tone, and it hurts, and you're not doing very well for a while. Split seconds, okay? And I see that all the time in the office. People come in. I was at the shooting range. I took my earmuffs off. Some guy blasted a 44 in the row next to me, and I can't hear very well all of a sudden. So just an idea as to what these decibel numbers mean, but bottom line is anything over 80, 85 decibels, and I'll show you what power tools tend to do in an isolated context in your shop, not including other stuff going on simultaneously. Just a couple of hours of exposure at 80 and 85 decibels, and we're already potentially damaging our hearing. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so, how do we actually hear? Your inner ear or cochlea has a series of fluid-filled chambers with membranes that vibrate inside the chambers. And these membranes contain tiny little hair cells that move back and forth. And the movement of these hair cells creates the electrical signals that are translated into sound. So if we have mild shearing motions, we're hearing normal sound. If you have a really, really loud sound coming into your cochlea transmitted through your eardrum, you create a lot of shear forces on those membranes. And these tiny little hair cells, they start to get damaged more and more and more and more. So if you look on, I guess, our left-hand side of that image, normal hair cells kind of have a pretty look to them. And these are photoelectron microscope images, okay? On the right-hand side, that image shows damaged hair cells, which have been taking a beating, from too loud sounds. Unfortunately, this kind of damage is irreparable, okay? Once we damage the hair cells in our inner ears, all kinds of stuff happens, including not hearing well anymore, starting to develop that annoying sound in your ears called tinnitus or tinnitus, however you wish to pronounce that. Okay, tomato, tomato, doesn't matter. There's all kinds of other things that we can screw up with loud sounds as well, including just comprehension. I can hear what they're saying, but I have no clue what the hell they're talking about. Okay, might as well be a foreign language. So before we even notice on our hearing tests in our office, which are the gold standard way of detecting hearing loss, you could have lost 30 to 50% of these little hair cells functioning in your cochlea. That usually translates into ultra high frequencies going up to like 20,000 decibels, basically where dogs are hearing, but we hear also. So when you're trying to hear classical music and the violins are playing, the flutes and piccolos are playing, all these ultra high frequency sounds that contribute to the beauty of music you may be listening to, you're not going to be hearing them. So basically by the time that you and I notice that we have some degree of hearing loss, that kind of deterioration has already happened. And it doesn't matter whether it's age, chemicals that we're exposed to, like chemotherapy agents or certain medications, or noise, okay? By the time we notice there's something going on, there's a lot of damage already there. And typically it's non-reversible. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so basically when we talk about noise-induced hearing loss, okay, we can go temporary and permanent. What we call a temporary threshold shift. You've been to a nightclub, you've been to a football game, you've been to a loud party, you walk out of there, your ears are ringing a little bit, everything's kind of muffled. And within minutes to hours to maybe a couple of days, your hearing comes back. Lucky you, good for you. Okay, it doesn't happen every time. You get enough of that, or you get a severe enough insult, and you'll get permanent damage. And studies have, in the last decade, have also shown you don't just damage those little hair cells inside your cochlea, but you can damage the cable or nerve that sends the signal back to the brain as well. Okay, the nerves inside your brain and the nerves in the cochlea, they communicate. And when these nerve endings begin to go, the adjacent ones also begin to go due to lack of stimulation. So there's more than just injuring the little hair cells in your cochlea. Next slide, please. All righty, so hearing loss. SNHL stands for sensory neural hearing loss, meaning your cochlea is not working well. There's something we call conductive or mechanical hearing loss, where your eardrum doesn't vibrate properly, or the little bones of hearing don't vibrate properly. And there's a lot of people who mixed. They have a combination of both. But in terms of sensory neural or cochlear hearing loss, patients will come to me and they'll say, hey, I hear people talking, but I don't really know what they're saying. Sometimes it's good when it's our wife doing that, but for the most part, this is a very, very common complaint. High-pitched sounds, you don't hear the turn signal in your car. Okay, you don't hear the alarm in the morning sometimes going off. Okay. Background noise, very, very common. You're in a crowded scenario. Okay, you're in a restaurant. All restaurants today absolutely suck. There are no sound absorbing materials within them. There's concrete, steel, a lot of glass and metal, and the sounds are just reverberating around, and you hear every table yakking, and you're trying to have a conversation with the people at your table, and you're just looking at their lips and, blah, blah, blah. You can't really understand what they're saying. So background noise becomes a huge issue. Yep, you're cranking up your television, et cetera. And then married speech. What do I mean by that? Every single one of us that's been married for a long time, and I've been married 32 years. Your wife is in the kitchen. You're in the living room or the bedroom. She's talking to you. And it's like it's Charlie Brown's teacher going wah 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 wah, and you're going, I don't know what the hell you're saying. Or she starts a sentence facing you, she turns around, walks out of the room, and it's wah 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 walking away. And then a week later, she says, remember, we're going to the Joneses for dinner tonight. And I go, you never told me that. And sure enough, she was in the kitchen wah wah wahing, and you didn't hear a thing in the bedroom. So the fact that you can't understand what's being said when someone's not facing you and talking to you is also another one of these types of symptoms. And sure, we can ask people, speak up, et cetera. And then there's also something called hyperacusis or hypersensitivity to sounds, where loud sounds bother you. Okay, somebody's turning the TV up and you're going, I can't handle this because it's too much. People are playing loud music near you, whether you like the music or not. It's very bothersome to you. Okay, car horns, sirens going by you. It almost hurts, and it's extremely uncomfortable. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so when we do hearing tests, this is a typical type of a hearing test. Do you have that laser dude guide pointer thing? I don't know if that'll work or not, but yeah, well, it doesn't do all that much. That's okay. So typical hearing test is here. When you're looking at the axis going from left to right on the top, that's the frequency spectrum. On the far left side are the very low pitch tones, going all the way across to very, very high pitch tones, okay? Going down vertically, you have the decibel rating, and it usually goes up to about 120 decibels, where we can test people in a sound booth, in an isolated environment. And when people always ask me, so what percentage of hearing have I lost? Remember, that's a logarithmic scale. It's not linear. So, I can make up crap and say, oh, it's 50%, and they walk out happy. Gee, I thought it was 70. No, it's only 50. But basically, anytime the answers come out above the 25 decibel line, which is kind of a darker line near the top, your hearing's considered within normal limits for an adult, okay? When we're 10 years old, we're way up at the top at 5, 10 decibels all the way across. By the time we're 40 years old, all of us have dropped down roughly to that 25 decibel threshold. And then 50, we're starting to drop off in that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12,000 range. 60, is dropping even lower, 70, 80. So most of age-induced hearing loss is predominantly high frequency related. This particular audiogram shows a noise-induced hearing loss pattern that's very, very classic. Due to the mechanics of how our eardrum vibrates and the bones of hearing vibrate, you're going to get a predominant peak at 4,000 hertz, where you just have a steep drop off from about 3,000 onward, and then a rebound back up. So these young guys who come in, they're in the military, or they like to shoot guns, they work on dragster engines, they'll come in with this kind of a hearing loss, okay? And they miss all kinds of different sounds and letters of the alphabet. I'll show you at the end of the presentation what this kind of a hearing loss, plus being over the age of 60, will look like. And it's definitely different, okay? But there are very real mechanical reasons why we see noise-induced hearing loss. And it's classically this 4,000 hertz drop and then a rebound, okay? Can we go to the next picture, please? Yeah, no sweat. What? Huh? Okay, so looking at what, what? Huh? All right, so I was curious as to what power tools actually did put out in terms of sound. Jim's done his study, I've done my unofficial study, but when you look at more formal studies with high-level sound meters that are out there, OSHA and the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, or however the hell you want to pronounce it, okay, they've done a lot of studies looking at industrial tools. So they use specific sound measuring meters. What's interesting is he said, hey man, I picked up my iWatch and I got all these different, readings out of my shop. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the same thing in my house. And there are currently over 130 apps available for your iPhone, 130 to measure sound levels. And about 120 some odd are free, okay? NIOSH put out a paper about 2 years ago looking at the ones that were available. And they said out of the 130, 120 are a piece of crap, okay? So they boiled it down to 10. And they did a bunch of studies using these 10 compared to their industrial standardized equipment. And they came out, relatively close, plus or minus 5 decibels. But 5 decibels is a big difference, okay? So they ended up doing their own app for your iPhone. So there's an NIOSH sound meter app. It's free. And if you have an iPhone, download the darn thing. And that's probably the most accurate one that's out there. And it's what I used in my shop to get comparisons with what Jim was able to get. For Android, unfortunately, these apps don't apply. The software doesn't process things well enough, and they don't have a good enough microphone. So Android users are a little screwed, but anyone with an iPhone, which is the majority of people in this room, I'm assuming, just download the NIOSH sound meter app, and it's extremely easy to use. So let's get into some data, and let's go to the next slide and see what we got going on. All right, so this is industrial power equipment. And I picked what I thought could apply to us because a lot of the stuff they put out, we don't have in our shops. If you do, I am not worthy, okay? You got some serious tools in your house. Just looking at a circular saw, the sound power level, and this was anything that's basically over the 85 decibel range. Remember, 85 dB, 2 hours, you can already be damaging your ears with that level of exposure. So circular saws, really pretty loud, going up to, over 100 to 113 dB. A power drill, I don't know what kind of drill, my drill's not that loud, but going up to 99. And they looked at a wide variety of different makes and models. Literally, I have a printout of 20 pages, single-spaced, where they took every power tool manufacturer they could get. So these are the ranges that they got, okay, on different manufacturers. Grinders got really loud. Hammer drills, I don't use one in my house. Impact wrench, I don't use one in my house. They were extremely loud. Now jigsaws, okay? I'm sure these are pretty highfalutin, big power jigsaws. My jigsaw does not make that kind of noise, but things got really pretty loud. A miter saw, we all have those, chop saws, miter saws in our shop, okay? We'll talk a lot more about miter saws. Reciprocating saws were loud. And a sander, not too bad, unless you really got a high power motor vacuuming some stuff out. So this is industrial data. Let's go and compare this. Next slide, please. All right, here's Jim's stuff. Okay, Jim was kind enough to provide me with all kinds of data. He was kind enough also to list his power tool types. I didn't put them on here, but you'll see that there's similarities and variabilities or in variation with what I'm going to show next. I think the takeaway message here is, yeah, the stuff in our shops is really pretty loud. Miter saw, king of the hill. Okay, especially when you're cutting through some kind of a board. Okay, the noise is pretty darn significant. A planer, and I'll show you my stuff, very, very loud. Okay, those two are top notch. Drum sanders, not too bad. Okay, 87, all righty, mid 80s, let's call it. A table saw. He's got a saw stop. I've got the exact same table saw in my house. And I thought it was a hell of a lot quieter than the Delta that I had a number of years ago, but it's still pretty loud. It's in the mid 90s. Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Joiners, okay, not that bad, less than a table saw. Bandsaw, I was amazed. I didn't think my bandsaw was loud. I never wear hearing protection around my bandsaw. It's just like, whatever, I'll just saw, it's fine, you know, go on. It's up there, okay. A lathe, you know, it's low down. Again, another sanding device, relatively low down. Spindle sander, really pretty quiet. A drill press, okay, not bad at all. A router, okay. Now we're talking. We got some noise going again. And the hand plane, you know. Hand tools, yeah, nice and quiet, all right. So we're seeing that miter saws, planers, okay, routers, and you could even say a table saw are really pretty loud bandsaws. So anything that's turning at a high RPM, okay, that's kind of the take-home message here. Yes, sir.
Just to make sure I understand the logarithmic scale.
Yeah.
Is an 80 twice as loud as 70? That
No, sir.
10?
That it's 10 times.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 10 times. And it gets, I mean, you go, if you have a, oh shit, I forget the numbers, but you can go up to 1 billion times louder. Like something at 120 dB is 1 billion times louder than something at 10 dB. 1 billion. Okay. Yeah, very similar. Absolutely correct. I mean, so these numbers are very deceptive. Don't let like a 5 dB difference lull you into, you know, false sense of complacency. So
dB is double.
Absolutely.
3 dB is double.
Bingo. All right, so let's go to my stuff. Next slide, please.
Andrew,
Yes, sir.
note that when I made my list, my watch is on my arm. The arm is close to the saw blade.
Bingo.
You really ought to be taking the reading up through your ear, but I couldn't do that.
Understood. So my readings were done at a distance. Okay, and another variable in the equation is he had his dust collection system going. Okay, and he has it in a separate room. Okay, which is bonus. I mean, that's absolutely ideal. I have 2 Delta, you know, vacuum canisters, and the way I have an L-shaped shop set up. So I'm basically within 15 feet of one of them at all times. And I didn't turn my dust collector on purpose when I was measuring these devices, okay? And I had my iPhone and I'm about 3 feet away. And if you put it right up next to the machine, yeah, you're gonna get 5 to 10 dB more. So this is from about 3 feet away on every single device. So my dust collectors alone were popping out, you know, in the mid 70s.
So what's the significance of that 3 feet?
You drop a fair bit of noise down. Okay, you do. So this is at 3 feet away, but that's where your head's going to be. Okay, so I looked at I have one of those Festool, you know, HEPA collectors, the little rolling one when I'm sanding. I thought that thing's quiet as hell. No, it's not. Okay, but it's under my workbench, and I got like a 5-foot hose on top of my workbench, sanding some stuff away. Yeah, the miter saw, loud. Okay. And I measured when I'm not cutting something and when I'm cutting something, went up 6 dB. 105 that's pretty darn loud. Okay. My planer, that's the bane of my existence in my shop. That thing is so loud. And I always wear hearing protection with that. It's just screaming when it's cutting something. My wife complains about it. She can hear it in the rest of the house. Sandfully, a drum sander, very, very, very quiet. My saw stopped right in line with yours. Okay, and I was sawing something with it. It went up 5 dB. It was just 3/4 inch ply going right through it. Okay. My joiner, relatively quiet. Bandsaw, relatively quiet. My lathe, also relatively quiet. Spindle sander, nothing. So sanders really aren't that impressive. My drill press, really pretty quiet. You can drill press all day long if you want. Yeah, but then you get down to the router table again, loud. Okay. So anything with really, really high RPM, those motors are going to really whine. And then depending on what substance you're cutting into or drilling into or carving into, any high RPM tool in your shop is really going to get to you. So if you're going to make it a habit to only wear hearing protection some of the time, just think about the really high RPM stuff that you're using. So you're rotating saws, okay, anything that spins with a bit really, really, really quickly. And these are really this is pretty consistent data. So I've got to get a little bit better. With my miter saw, it's like, like 5 seconds you're cutting something. I shouldn't be stupid and I should be wearing hearing protection. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in summary, the loudest woodworking tools in the typical shop: miter saw, your planer, your router, and your table saw. Okay, high RPM stuff. But then, if you've got a freestanding dust collector or two like I have, you're probably pumping the background noise up even more. Okay, and even when I was 15 feet away from one of my dust collectors, the background sound was somewhere between 70 and 74 decibels. Okay, so you're adding probably extra volume to that. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about how you can measure all this kind of stuff. Get the app, put it on your phone, just for the heck of it, and see what your shop is really doing. And consider your distance from the tools, like Jim was saying. His stuff came out, I think, a little louder because he put his watch right close by. But download that app. The NIOSH people recommend you get a fancy microphone, plug it into your phone. Forget that. I don't think you need that. We're getting, I think, a pretty accurate reading from what's what. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so how can we prevent noise-induced hearing loss? Well, there's kind of just a basic rule of thumb. If you need to shout over something that's being used to be heard, it's too loud and you're damaging your ears. That's just, bottom line. So when your wife comes down and tells you to stop screwing around in the shop and you got a power tool going and she's yelling and you're barely hearing her, it's too loud and you're hurting your ears. Okay. So hearing protection comes in all kinds of different forms. You can get the cheapo little foam earplugs from Home Depot or wherever you want, stick them in your ear. At best, they attenuate sound 5 to 10 decibels. The military just got sued for gajillions of dollars, and the manufacturer 3M lost gajillions of dollars for providing crapola earplugs to active military personnel, okay, that didn't work worth a flip. What they claimed they didn't do at all. So earplugs alone really don't do that much. Earmuffs, 20 dB, that's huge, okay? $20 gets you a nice pair of earmuffs, wear them. I got earmuffs set up all over my shop. You can use combination of plugs and muffs too if something's really loud, and I'll talk about who should do that, okay? They're custom-made devices. So we have a hearing aid dispensary in our practice where we sell all different shapes and sizes of hearing aids. Some people need custom-made ear molds to hear optimally, okay? There are custom-made earplugs that can be made for musicians, for hunters. We have earplugs today that are basically hearing aids that are custom molded to your ears, and above 90 dB, when you're firing your shotgun or your rifle or your handgun, sound kicks out immediately. During the rest of the time, it's working as a hearing aid. And you can basically hear a cricket farting at 50 yards. They're that good. Okay. And I've spent years trying to convince my hunting buddies, you got to get these, you got to wear these, you got to get them. Finally, my first hunting trip this year out to South Dakota, 5 of my long-term buddies, all of whom are 65 and above, they finally acquiesced, got these custom-made shooters plugs, put them in their ears. They amplified everything. They could hear the pheasants getting up. They could hear themselves cracking jokes. But the moment the gun went off, just oh my God, this is miraculous. So there's custom stuff out there that if you have a hard time hearing and you still want to hear while you're using loud stuff, the technology today is incredibly good. Other thing, and yes, sir.
Those work really well for gunshot, really sharp sound.
Yes, sir. Automatically. They do. But save yourself a lot of money, $20 at Home Depot. Get earmuffs. That's the simplest thing to do. Another thing is if you got a lot of lumber you're going through and it's really loud, just take a break. Give your ears a rest, okay? And your ear will recover, sir.
Like noise canceling, like headphones do anything for you?
Depends on, so noise canceling headphones work on a different premise. Noise canceling headphones work on, I'll call it the inverted sine wave principle. Let's say your sound's coming in like this. After a couple of seconds, it picks up what frequencies of sound there are and it phase delays the sound. So when your sound's doing this, it puts the inverse into your ear at the same time. So you're basically just doing this, but it doesn't really attenuate the volume that much. It knocks out frequencies more. You'll get some dB reduction, but it's not quite as good as just non-attenuating ones.
How about AirPods? Those seem to be doing a really good job.
What? Huh? No, they're not that good, sir.
I've got a pair of mugs for shooting.
Yeah,
They act like those hearing aids you talked about.
bingo. Those are good. Use those in the shop if you want to hear stuff when people are talking to you. Gentleman in the back.
Notice a lot of difference in sound with like helical cutter heads.
Yes, sir. This is not a helical cutter head that I've got. I wish. Yeah. I cheaped out years ago. Should have bought those. Yeah, definitely different decibel levels, sir.
The earplugs you were describing for your hunting.
Yeah.
Does the technology come around to where it blocks the wind noise?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, the older style ones, the wind would come in and be rustling. So these guys would complain they hated using them, especially like when you're out, it's really, really windy. Now it's phenomenal. There's different settings. You just kind of tap it and you pick what levels you want. No, these things are spectacular now. Absolutely spectacular. Okay, so take a break. If you're doing a lot of chop sawing or you're doing a lot of routing, okay, just give your ears a break, okay? And basically, like I said, use a sound meter in your shop, just out of curiosity, see how loud things really, really are. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, so what if we already have hearing loss? All right, safe bet most of us, okay, in this room are 60 and over. I am, okay? And at that age range, we're already losing some hearing. And when you already have deterioration of your inner ear or cochlea, your ears are much more sensitive to sound damage than, let's say, a 20-year-old's ears are, okay? So once we see a drop in your hearing already on an audiogram, if I have a hunter, I'm going, you moron, wear some hearing protection when you're shooting. Huh? What? Yeah, you're a dumbass. Wear some hearing protection. Same thing in our shops. Okay, we're all gentlemen of a certain vintage, shall we say. All of us in this room have some degree of hearing loss. Okay, some of us more than others. So you're definitely more prone to worsening your hearing loss if you already have some hearing loss present. Okay, so important things, these last two lines: untreated hearing loss accelerates the onset of cognitive decline. Whenever I have a patient who comes into my office and we're testing their hearing, they know they're there because they can't hear well. I look for certain criteria in terms of how well they're understanding words in a controlled environment like a sound booth, and I look at the degree of hearing loss that they're already manifesting. And a lot of times I have to tell them that, you know what, they're a very good candidate for hearing aids. Usually the men who come to see me, the first time I tell them the classic story, Mr. Smith, your hearing's really not that good, sir. You could really use some hearing aids. That's the answer I get back. Okay. A year or two goes by, Mr. Smith comes back again for his hearing test. His hearing's gone down. He's 2 years older. I say, sir, your hearing's much worse this time. You should really consider some hearing aids. I get 2 fists back. Okay. Finally, Mrs. Smith. Okay. Drags him in, kicking and screaming. We set Mr. Smith up with the best hearing aids the money can buy, adjust everything perfectly to match his sound levels that he needs. He comes back about a month later. He goes, Doc, everything's louder, but I still can't understand what people are saying. Why? Remember I said earlier, we process sound in our ears. We hear it in the brain. Yeah, so somebody's iWatch is talking to them. Oh, I know. No worries. Okay, so what's happening here? We have a special part of the brain called the central auditory processing center. And basically all the sound and all the letters of the alphabet that come in from your ears go here. And that's where we understand language. Okay. If we're not sending all these sounds and letters of the alphabet into these language processing centers over time, their function does this. The function atrophies. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're 20, 30, 70, or 80 years old. Everybody's hearing centers in their brain does this. So there's a window of opportunity for all of us with some degree of hearing loss. If we should be looking at hearing aids, you get them before this happens, because there's no way to reverse that trend in your brain. I must be hearing voices. That's okay. So what I tell, what I tell all the patients is, look, when I'm recommending hearing aids to you, it's not that I can fix your hearing. I cannot. We don't have the technology for that, but I'm trying to keep your brain healthy. Okay. One of the most undertreated things that we can do to prevent the onset of, or the accelerated onset of dementia or memory impairment is to treat hearing loss. Okay. If any one of us in the room, some of us are going to get dementia, some of us are not. Okay. But if you don't treat hearing loss, your dementia is going to come on faster. Why? All the other cognitive or thought processing parts of your brain, they run through your language processing areas. So you're setting up a roadblock when these areas don't work well anymore. So if you're healthy and you're vibrant, you're taking care of yourself, don't screw around with your hearing. Yes, sir. Let me finish. One more thing, please. Hearing aids sucked 5 to 10 years ago. They were terrible. Today, the modern day stuff that's available is incredibly good and comfortable and just so much better performing than it used to be. We now have language processing algorithms that are excellent. There's music processing algorithms. So if you want to listen to your LPs and your CDs and hear stuff you haven't heard in decades, that kind of stuff's available. So when I tell patients, I'm not trying to treat your hearing with hearing aids, I'm trying to treat your brain and keep it healthy. That's the message I want to get across to people. A lot of primary care physicians don't get it. The lay public doesn't get it. Please get it in this room. Okay. Hearing loss can screw with your brain in a very, very bad way. There's no excuse for it anymore, as far as I'm concerned. So modern digital programmable hearing aids are outstanding. You don't need anything super fancy. You need something really good, and you need a very good audiologist, the person that programs them for you, to manage them, take care of them, help you use them. Over-the-counter hearing aids to be determined yet as to how good, bad, or indifferent they are. It'd be like me asking you to go out and fix your own eyeglass prescription if you need a special prescription. Sir, you first, then you.
So as I take it, what you just said is that process that deteriorates, there's no way to rebuild that.
Correct. There's a lot of research going into trying to wake these parts of the brain back up, and we've failed miserably so far. Okay. Sir.
Is there a difference with over-the-ear hearing aid versus in-ear?
No, sir, there's not. Okay, basically, over the ear, about 90% of patients currently are wearing, basically, you have the little thing that sits right on the top, the little fishing line that goes into your ear canal, and then a soft open mold cone with little perforations in it, okay? The benefit that most people like with those is that you're not blocking up your ear canals completely, like having your fingers stuck in your ears, and your voice doesn't echo in your head. And these tend to be very comfortable, wide range of programmability in the part that goes up at the top, okay? Usually the custom-made, fully in the ear hearing aids that block you up are for people who have significant hearing loss, where we really have to kind of pump the sound in a different way. So 90% of the hearing aids today are what are called RICs or RICs, which are the style that this gentleman has. Thing up here, the invisible fishing line, and then the cone in the ear. And just to put it in perspective, I look at ears day in, day out, day in, day out. I don't know that my patients are wearing these things. Okay, you can have no hair, be wearing this, and I won't know that you have that thing in until I'm putting my otoscope in to check for wax and other problems in the ear. So the visibility issue is really not that big a deal. Girls are lucky, long hair, they can cover whatever the hell they want. You know, but for us gentlemen, it's a different story. One more slide, please. All right, so age-induced hearing loss, okay? If you remember the pattern from before, 4,000 hertz, it drops down, then it rebounds. Well, the bottom line going down, that's a pretty typical pattern for a 70 to 75-year-old, okay? And you're basically missing the vast majority of the high-pitched consonants like S, ch, k, p, sh, that kind of stuff. And that's in the ultra high pitch range. And when you're going back towards the middle, you're missing the softer consonants like M, R, N, D, G, F, those kind of sounds. You're great with the vowels. A, E, I, O, U are on the far left-hand side of the page. So if we were living in China speaking Mandarin, y'all would be doing great. Okay. But in Western languages where we rely on the consonant combinations, you miss out on a tremendous amount. And that's when you go, I know they said something, but I can't tell if it's this or this, and you're looking at lips and you're doing all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you add age onto noise damage and you really dug a hole for yourself. So I hope this kind of explains stuff a little bit better to you guys. And I'm not trying to sell you all hearing aids, but please understand, they're really good today and they're better for your brain than you ever imagined. Sir. If you're 65 and over, and get a baseline, okay? See where you are. Genetics determines where you're going to be. I have 80-year-olds with phenomenal hearing, but usually that's at the expense of something else. God gives you great ears, you got crappy something else, okay? And then I got the 40-year-old with, you know, terrible ears and stud athlete of some kind. You know what I mean? But I think 65 and up, know where you are. And then if there's nothing major going on, see you in a couple of years. Okay, but if we're already demonstrating some degree of hearing loss for a variety of reasons, I'll probably see you annually. You know, and we just keep an eye on it. And then ultimately it gets to a point where your ability to understand words, even in a perfectly quiet environment like a sound booth, becomes compromised. Okay, it's time to think about stuff. Sir. Yes, sir.
I had sudden onset a couple of years ago, woke up one morning,
Yep.
and I've been to a ENT, and he basically just shrugs and says, "Boy,
I'm assuming he tested your hearing.
my hearing's great,
Okay.
it's the ringing."
Gotcha. There's reasons for that tinnitus or tinnitus, however you wish to pronounce it, that have to do with your inner ear. There's reasons for having to do with the cable that connects your inner ear to your brain. And there's actually reasons not having anything to do with your ear at all that can cause the tinnitus. So I welcome you to see me in the office and we'll go through that in more detail. When I see a perfect hearing test, patient comes in complaining of tinnitus, there's a lot of different things to talk about. And is there any really good management for it? It depends on what's causing it. Some of the modern day hearing aids can actually put in white noise and try to, again, neutralize the frequency that you're hearing that at. But I mean, that's a long discussion. I think I've overstayed my time here, but I hope not.
Every minute.
Thank you, sir.
I don't wanna come off sounding on the wrong side of this, because I believe in everything you did. From personal experience,
Mhm.
I've been working in my shop and I was wearing my earmuffs.
Yep.
Turned my power saw off.
Yep.
I had taken the guard off because of what I was cutting. And it was behind me, so I was standing on the out end. And I said, where's my tape measure? Now the saw has been off for a while, but it's still
going.
pointing down.
Yeah.
I reached around like this.
Ooh.
and-
Yeah, I got you.
So I just wanted to say that hearing is an important one of your five senses.
No question.
And if you blunt it too much with muffs, you're gonna lose, I'm convinced that if I had not had the muffs on.
You wouldn't
I
have had
would have
this.
Heard it. I would have heard. it.
You know, you're probably right. I think it's more a matter of behavioral patterns. The moment I hit the off button on my power tool, I just take the stuff off. That's just become habit for me. And you know, there's a rule in life, shit happens, and unfortunately, that's a terrible example of it, though. Sir.
Unfortunately, my hearing aids are broken right now.
Yes, sir.
And we have to get them repaired.
Yep.
So when I have tinnitus.
Yep.
So when I put the hearing aids on, it seems to go away.
Yeah. And it can't. There's so many different cures or fixes for tinnitus that are out there. Everything that's advertised that's a pill or I've seen crap where you put a water bottle on your cheek and you shake it around. I mean, there's unbelievable stuff that's out there. A lot of times, so let's talk about tinnitus for a second. In your cochlea, where those little hair cells are, some of the hair cells are designed to be activated to create sound. Some of the other hair cells are designed to knock out sound. So there's a checks and balance system in your inner ear. And unfortunately, the ones that are designed to knock out sound are more fragile than the ones that create sound. So in theory, we think that those sound negating hair cells, because they deteriorate first, aren't there to prevent some kind of sound coming in. And when your cochlea sends a signal to the brain, your brain has no choice to interpret it, but there's ringing, humming, buzzing, whistling, crickets chirping, you know, ocean sound, what have you. By putting something in your ear canal, you're changing the way sound is being perceived from the outside world. And you may just have enough horsepower in those negating cells in your cochlea to work at taking your tinnitus down. But tinnitus also does this, the volume of it, it's kind of like a sine wave. Okay, yeah, you know, you wake up in the morning, you're feeling great, life is good, you haven't been yelled at by she who must be obeyed. Your tinnitus is good, okay? The stress of the day goes on, you got all kinds of stuff to do, be there, here, there. Your tinnitus does this, okay? You're having a better day, the tinnitus does that, a worse day. So tinnitus is actually a barometer of stress, and that's something I emphasize to my patients. Psychologically, you're having a crappy day, emotionally a crappy day, physically, schedule-wise, okay? Your tinnitus is going to be louder, and then it gets better and louder and better. So there's so many different facets to tinnitus, and we don't have a great handle on an awful lot of it, but I'm glad your hearing aids are working that way for you. Guys, I enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Bob's been a terrific supporter of the tool sales, showing up and helping us prepare for the sales and conduct the sales. He was first influenced in woodworking by his grandfather at a pretty young age. Over the years, he's worked on cabinetry and chip carving and marquetry and some furniture restoration. So he's got a pretty broad range of expertise. Bob also teaches at an elementary school, which he's been doing for about 6 years. I think we'll see a little bit of that in a minute, but I'll just end with his favorite finish is shellac. Here's Bob.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here and talk to you folks. My presentation is based on experience. I've been that guy who bought the dust collector that was the little thing that rolled around and made a ton of noise. We're going to talk today about not only dust collection, but dust prevention. It's more what we should be interested in as opposed to collecting this stuff, right? I mean, it's like we collect dollar bills, we collect this, we collect that, and cars and stuff. But why do we want to collect dust? Let's prevent it. Let's keep it from happening. Next slide. This is going to go pretty quick, guys. So the topics I'm going to cover today are cleaning the air. And that's the one of the most important things. And you see above us, we've got this air circulator up here. We call it a air scrubber. We're going to talk about picking up wood chips. See this young lady and the job she's got here. Hopefully we don't have to do anything like that. We're also going to talk about configuring your system. I get these questions from people and they say, Bob, I hear you got a great dust collection system, but I don't even know how to get started. Well, I didn't either. And unfortunately for me, I spent that money. I went on that trail, right? I bought this, keep getting something better. And finally I gave up and I said, there's got to be a better way. And there is. And hopefully I can communicate that to some of you today and help you not go through that same painful financial experience and actually get no results by following what we're going to do here. And we're going to talk about cyclones. How many of you got a cyclone in your house right now? Huh? I mean, I got two. I got one that shares my bedroom and the other one that works in my shop. So Anita wouldn't appreciate that, would she? So what we're going to do is, next slide.
It's on video too.
Yeah, it is. That's okay. That's okay. She expects it from me. We're going to talk first about cleaning the air. And so this little dust cloud you see, that is a jet 3-speed. I think it's like 1,000 CFM kind of system. And notice where it's mounted, close to the ceiling and centered on the room. And this is an important thing. This is a real important thing. We've got several dust generators in there. Miter saw, you see it in the cabinet. We've got a bandsaw in the back. And we got a table saw. And I did something with the table saw. I'll show you a little bit later. Next slide. When you put a air scrubber in your shop, if you listen to conventional wisdom, they'll tell you to put it along the wall and blow the hell out of it, okay? And that's wrong. And how do I know that's wrong? Because that's what I did. And it just put more dust in my shop than I had before. So blowing it along the wall causes everything to accelerate. It hits the back wall or some obstacle, and then it goes back along the bottom side. This is looking at it from above. Next slide. We also don't want to point it in the wrong direction. That first slide had it pointed in the correct direction, but it was just not doing you any good. A lot of dust is getting past you. And this one, you don't want it in this direction. We were in a shop this past week. We're going to have a sale there this weekend. And that guy has his dust air scrubber pointed in this direction. He's sucking all the dust out of the shop. What's he doing with it? Some of it's going right past his air scrubber into other spaces. And that's what you do not want. By turning it around and having it blow into your shop, it sounded counterintuitive. But what happens is it goes back and hits that back wall, comes down. Dust has got a little bit of weight to it. It will also work with gravity. It pulls it back around and pulls it back up. Next slide. Next slide. I don't know. There we go. So what you want to do is put it up in the center of the ceiling. Put it up as high as you can get, but don't go much above 8 feet, because then all of a sudden, you know, you got that area that it's starting to cavitate instead of creating what we call laminar airflow. By pushing it back from the center of the room, back across any implement that you have, any, what do we call those? Dust generators. What you're going to do is push it back down. It'll hit that back wall, it'll go down, and it'll pull that dust with it, that lightweight dust. That's what we care about. The big stuff we can take care of. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit, or at least it worked in my shop. But this one, once I did this, and then next slide, with the air scrubber pushing along and bringing it down, and this is looking at from the side of the shop, all your critical pieces of equipment along here generating dust, it comes back around and comes right up into that air scrubber. Roughly 1,000 CFM is what's recommended. Next slide. And this is how it's mounted. I had it the other way before. And I got a room adjacent to this room that was getting full of dust. Next slide. Now, with it mounted the way it is right now, the way I just suggested to you, pushing the air back across the top of the room and down and coming back around, what's happening is it's creating that laminar airflow and it's picking it back up and bringing it right back up into the air scrubber. And this room here, this distance here is almost nothing. You see the HVAC system in the water heater? That little wall in front of it is just studs. There's no drywall on it. There is zero dust in that area, except for what normally gets generated. I can go back there and run my hand across things that have been not moved in months, and there's no wood dust on my hand. Now, this doesn't sound like it's the right thing, but I can tell you this is how it works. If you've got an air scrubber in your shop, this is how you want to mount it. This is how you want to operate it. Next slide. This air scrubber, most of them are 3-speed, the big ones, the jets and that's what we see in a lot of shops is the jets. The last few tool sales we've had, they've all been jets, 3 speeds. They've got 2 filters. They've got the first filter on the front. This is a replaceable one. You can get this at any of the local shops, but they also have this bag filter in the back of it that really does clean out. One of the things I advise you to do is put it on your schedule to change and clean. Change that filter. If it doesn't look dirty, make some judgment on it. I'm talking about the outer filter, but that inner filter, get inside there and figure out what's going on. You can't just put a piece of Mylar tape on the outbound side of this thing and wait for it to quit flapping before you go up and change the filter. Now, we've seen that in a couple of shops. You can't do that. That's no indication of how dirty that thing really is. And then as soon as it gets a little bit dirty, and I say a little bit dirty, when you can see the dust inside it, it's underperforming. It's not catching all that. The volume that you're looking for is what's important. Next slide. Oh yeah, and back up 1 second. Start your unit before you begin work. Get that air moving. And let it run for a minute or so afterwards. It doesn't have to run forever. Just let it run for a minute or so afterwards. This is cleaning the shop, making sure the air is clean. At the end of the slide, I'm going to say you should be wearing a mask too. I don't care if you think you don't need one, just get it and wear it. I bought some black masks recently at a good price. And what I learned was the black mask showed me how much dust I was really getting. And I didn't realize that before, but it wasn't until I saw the contrasting colors on that. So wear a mask, folks. It's not a bad thing to do. Next. We want to collect it at the source too. And this is something you see back there what the miter saw is. I've got that cabinet around there that really does a super job. And the back of that cabinet's got suction tied to it. It's a 4-inch pipe. And I also tried a little trick here with my table saw because I thought, what the heck? I need to get the dust. Now it won't get the wood chips and it won't get the fibers that go flying from the blade, but it gets the dust. I got no more dust coming off my table saw. And that's amazing. I never thought it would work that way. I was trying to catch all those little chips and things that go up your shirt and across your pants and you have to dust yourself off. But it catches that light dust, that airborne dust. And all it is tied right in with a little Y there, right to the 4-inch line. Next slide. Also, for your workshop, we want to get into a position where we are pulling that dust that we're generating on our work table across into an air scrubber. Next slide. Air scrubber of many different types. You see in the center there, that's a conventional small air scrubber, little Ryobi or something like that. That does a nice job of generating laminar airflow, and that's what we're looking for. We want to get that air circulating, and we want it to move. Or you can just get a box fan and a filter. I'm telling you, these things really work great. They're fantastic. I'm getting a lot of nods in the shop here, okay? A downdraft table is terrific, but sometimes it puts your arms up like this, right? And you just, all of a sudden your shoulders are getting sore. And if you're like me, that's not a good thing. A hose connection to a sander. Now be careful with this. You put a shop vac with this on there. If you add a cyclone in between there, it's going to suck your bucket in, okay? This kind of connection to a shop vac does slow down the motion of the air, and it actually is going to cause your shop vac to fail prematurely. So be careful. You might put a little valve on there or something that gives you extra airflow. Next slide. I ran across this kind of connection system, and this is just a sidebar, for our bench tops. Let's say we got a grinder and we got a small spindle sander, and we may have a disc sander, a small porch or a benchtop spindle sander or something like that, or a disc sander. This is a great system. See the little green dollar marks there? That indicates it's somewhere around $150, $200 for this system. I think it's $159. You can find it cheaper, but this is a terrific system. It comes with 5 blast gates. It comes with 5 outlets. It comes with the clear pipe that you can cut. It comes with the clamps, the fasteners, and the adapter for your shop vac. Hook that up to your cyclone and your benchtop tools that you're using to now create dust. That'll all go away. Hook them all up. Your miniature 10-inch bandsaw, your grinders, things like that. Next slide. That's from PowerTech. This is an actual system that is operated by one of our esteemed members, Brent Richardson. He put this together at a couple of tool sales. We ran across an Oneida system with some hookups. He built this thing. And what he did for himself here is nothing short of a miracle in terms of collecting dust and preventing premature failure of the filter system in his shop vac and the motor from just burning itself up. Because once you get that filter plugged up, it overloads that motor and it will burn up on you. Next slide. And then you just saw back there, it said something about preserving filter, helping your filter last longer. Well, we're going to talk more about that later on. Next slide. This is an ideal shop. This slide came courtesy of Wood Magazine. When I contacted them, they sent this to me and said, this is just what we have. So the one thing I would suggest in here is if you do have your cyclone system with the power unit all connected, isolate that thing, put it in another room. If you can't put it in another room, build a SOGI screen or something around it to knock down that noise. And maybe a little insulation on that. Just some movable panels will do a remarkable job of cutting down on the noise, and that'll help you hear things better.
But no, if you put another room, you still need access to run the airflow back to your shop because it's sucking air out and it's going to lose power unless you're allowing air back through the other way.
Make up there.
Yes and no. Okay. There's enough volume in most spaces. If you want to isolate it and close it off entirely, you're absolutely right. You got to have some ventilation for that air to circulate. Absolutely. But if it's just in another room or behind a wall or behind a screen, that's not something you have to worry. But that's a good point, and I appreciate that. So next slide. Just to kind of give us an idea of how much volume we're going to need, because some of the questions when I started talking about doing this presentation, people said, well, the thing I'm concerned about is how much velocity do I need? How much CFM do I need? Well, you're going to learn in just a little bit. That's not something you have to worry about too much. Honest to goodness. I've surprised myself when I built this system. It just shocked me as to how good it performed. So, but these are some of the offenders. And what we're talking about is what size ducting do you need? And it says up here 5-inch ducting or 4-inch ducting or 3-inch ducting or 6-inch ducting. The PVC that we're going to recommend you use comes in 4-inch and 6-inch sizes. That 6-inch size gets very pricey. The 4-inch isn't. Most shops get along just fine and will get along just fine with a 4-inch with the proper dust collector attached to it. And you're going to be surprised at how little amount of dust collector you're going to need to pull something like this off. Let's keep moving. Next slide. Oh, so if you're just collecting wood chips, maybe this will work for you. Next slide. Or if you're getting the big stuff, you might need a big boy, right? Get out there and suck this stuff up. Or the next slide. Or just like this young lady here, she's out on the job picking up a lot of sawdust and chips and things. But maybe you're trying to do everything and you want a single purpose system that'll handle all of it. That's where we're going to go next. A whole shop system. This system is on a 4-inch PVC drain pipe. You can get it in 6-inch drain pipe. It runs, there's about 30 feet of pipe on this. More like 28. It has a down drops. Next slide. And this is what it's connected to. And this is probably something familiar to some of you, either whether it's a jet collector like we have over here, you know, or another type of a machine. This is a 1.5 horsepower unit. It has roughly 1,500 CFM in it. It's got a nice 2-micron filter on the output side of it. And I've done some tricks to it. I put a vibration noise isolation system up above, but it's got a quick disconnect and a pair of 20-gallon swap out drums on it. This works really nice. This is in a separate room. It's in a bathroom. It's got an open door and there's plenty of air circulation. Okay, move on. This is simple and it's easy to build, honest to goodness. My recommendation, and the industry recommends, do not use 90-degree connections. Take the time to put a pair of 45s in there and run it on down. Okay, whether you do a single drop, an end connection, or you're doing multi-drops off of one drop from the ceiling, always use something that's casual. Air does not like to flow around 90-degree corners. What happens is it builds up turbulence and it throws chips and dirt back at you. Okay, you're going to have your system confused. Next slide. Oh, and by the way, that runs about $4 to $5 a linear foot, including fittings. It's really affordable. Think about it. You got 30 feet of pipe with fittings. In this case, it's probably more like 60 feet of pipe with the drops. That's not too bad. That's a pretty good price, especially when you figure out you got a really clean shop and everything's coming together for you. In this particular situation, whether you're using 4 or 6-inch pipe, the assembly, you do not have to glue this stuff. Just make sure it's got a nice square cut, press it, fit it, and put some sheet metal screws in it, hold it together. That's kind of counterintuitive, I know, but it works. And what it does is it allows just enough air leakage to prevent other things from happening that you don't want to have happen, that you won't realize will happen if you do glue it. And so avoid 90-degree connections, measure once, cut twice, and support runs. When you measure once, cut twice, you're not going to get it too short, are you? Next slide. So here we are, very inexpensive hangers for your ceilings, for your pipe. These cost about $2. They are adjustable. They nail into the ceiling joist and they hang on the pipe and they fit the pipe perfectly. You don't have to have metal straps. You don't have to have webbing straps or anything else. These work very nicely. It is recommended, though, that you support these drops on the floor. In other words, it runs all the way down and you connect up your flexible hosing to go to your device, your appliance, support it on the floor. So that weight is not all on there. And so it doesn't move around when you move your machine or if you happen to stub your toe on that piping. Next slide. Cutting it, sawzall, handsaw, miter chop saw. Some miter chop saws won't cut all the way through. You have to rotate it, finish the cut, or use a handsaw to finish it. But do not, don't ask me how I know this, okay? Do not use your table saw. Do not use your bandsaw. It will damage the tires on your bandsaw. All that fine polyurethane or poly PVC will get on the tire and just embed itself right in the tires under the blade, and you can't get it out. What's the solution? You change the tires. Next slide. And also that bandsaw will kick back on you and pull your hands right into the blade. Static electricity is a challenge. Some of us have read where, oh my God, I don't want to catch my shop on fire. I don't want to catch my house on fire. Static electricity, I'm going to burn the place up. So I got to take care of this. According to some people that really know what they're talking about in this business, it's not necessary. But if you want to do it, go ahead, get you some 18 or 20 gauge braided unshielded wire, uncoil it and just let it lay on the floor, tie a rag to one end of it, go to the end of your run, open it up, stick that rag in there and turn that machine on. It's going to suck that wire all the way through from beginning to end. And then tie it off at each end, and then take each one of those connections and tie them to a known ground, and you're done.
So long you've got a cyclone, you don't want to pull that.
Oh, you don't want to pull through directly. I agree. And where we're going to go with this is we're not going to accept anything but cyclones for our solutions. And cyclones are affordable these days, but that's for later on. So this is something that really does work. But Bill Pence, I did some research. Bill Pence has got some really good practical discussions about dust collection and particularly static discharge. Yes, sir.
I've seen people build systems where they actually wrap
Around, and that works. It works fine. Oh, sure. But it's bare copper wire that they're doing it with, right? And so the PVC, if you ever rub your hand on these big PVC pipes, you'll feel that static electricity in them. And when the air is running through there and the wood chips are running through there in the dust, it can build up some static electricity, but it's not the kind that's going to create electric arcs and discharges and cause fires. Okay. And most of these systems are grounded one way or another. You just don't realize it. But so if you're cautious about this and you really want to pay attention to it, go ahead and do that. It won't hurt. One side effect of this is PVC tends to have sort of a static magnetic property to it, where it's like nylon. When you see nylon, how things will cling to it from the static electricity. It's along those properties. And that dust will, on certain long runs, will collect on the inside of the walls of those pipes. This will prevent it from happening. If you run this wire through there, it won't happen. And I have a friend up in Ball Ground that's got an enormous shop. You know, about 15 Grizzly machines in there. And Grizzly was happy with him. But anyways, he has some pretty high runs. And he said when he put that in there, it eliminated all the dust that was built up inside his pipes. But he wasn't worried about static electricity. Next slide. Blast gates. What do? Well, the aluminum ones, I've seen recently, the newer ones are pretty darn good. They're not bad. The thing you have to be cautious of when you buy one, if you're looking at that, is make sure it's not the kind that's going to clog up on you. Because they'll build up dust inside the tracks or where it closes and it won't close all the way. It's not efficient. It loses its efficiency. The plastic ones, don't even think about it. You're going to regret every penny you spend on those plastic gates. It should be outlawed. Automated, you can go very expensive. You can go radio controlled systems. You can get something like and we're going to show some of those in a little bit. And then there's a DIY product. Got an example of a great DIY product right here. Okay. Next. So here's a homemade shop made blast gate, and you can see when it's closed, it does a pretty decent job. When you just manually push it over and it's open. And so what happened was some sneaky little guy had a dream one night and he said, I want to automate this stuff. Okay. So he put some micro switches down here. This is courtesy of Mark McClurg, and he did exactly the same thing. He brought this in to show me, but here's essentially how it works. Just like so. And he painted his red so you can tell when it's open or closed. So at least from a distance. This little micro switch is hooked up to the central control center. And next slide. There's a pair of wires that run to it. And the blast gate sensor control inside there is a relay. When that micro switch is engaged, that relay pulls 120, that fires up the dust collector. Okay. When you pull that gate open, back up one. When you pull the gate open, you only have to move it about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch. You don't have to pull it all the way, and you want to pull it partially so that the dust collector can wind down without putting any strain on it, and then go ahead and close the gate all entirely. But just pull it a little bit, it shuts it right off. I got it. Yeah.
Mark switches, are they wired or wired?
Yeah, they're wired. There's just like lamp cord wire or speaker wire pair that runs all the way along the top, and then I run a drop down. And if you understand what parallel connections are in wiring, then you understand that. Otherwise, to just say it's a drop that comes down from each strand above as those strands continue on, and then it's connected through the switch. And when the switch is engaged, it sends a signal right back to that relay. That relay pulls, turns the 110 on, goes right into the to the dust collector and turns it on. And when you pull that, the switch is disengaged and it immediately starts winding down. Okay, next slide. And this blast gate sensor, next slide. Back up one. Okay. There is some automation out there that's available for you, and some of you may be using this today. Current sensing technology, if you have the Festool system, it's got that plug where you put your machine in, and as soon as you turn your machine on, it turns on the dust collector. And I think Fine's system is that way, but you can get accessories that'll do exactly the same thing. Remote control systems like key fobs, garage door openers, et cetera. That's another way to do it. We've seen people with them, they hang them on their belt or whatever, and they just turn it on and off that way. And that's certainly a nice way to do it. And then there's the automated system. Now, these green dollars you see there sort of give you an idea about price. It's a 3-digit number in the hundreds, low hundreds, high hundreds. These automatic systems that come in with radio control and all that, these are more for industrial kind of applications where you have a big cabinet shop or something like that. But, you know, if you want to, you can get that, okay? Put it in yours. Or a DIY. It's easily done. Believe me, it's not hard to do. Next slide. When we look at the evolution of how we came about doing this, we kind of started out with our little broom and our dustpan, right? And then we got a shop vac. Oh my God, that was just the bane of everything, having a shop vac. Well, you at least clean the place up instead of tracking it into the house. And then we got into something called cyclones. And the hands that were raised really made me feel good about this, because if there's not a cyclone in your shop today, you need to find a way to get one in there. Okay, you just got to do that. And before, cyclones were very expensive, but they're not anymore. They're just not expensive anymore. Next. Here's a cyclone from Mayfield Lumber up in McMinnville, Tennessee. That's a monster. He does Appalachian hardwoods. There's quite a bit of stuff. He sells all over the world. Next slide. So why do we want a cyclone? I mean, it's maybe obvious to some of us and some not, but it does gather everything. Let that sink in. It gathers everything. Chips, flakes, everything from your jointer, everything from your planer, your table saw, all the devices that you've got dust collection hooked up to. It gathers everything.
Small screws and parts.
Oh yeah, it'll pick up anything. If you have a shot or a shot wand hooked up to it, it'll pick all that stuff up. Face mask, boop. You know, where'd that go? I even had one pick up a connection for a dust collector. Okay, you know, so had to go chase that down. One of the things that is really the big benefit in this is how it captures the dust. The other is replacement of filters. Now, we all know what filters cost, right? These are double-digit kind of things, $39, $49, $59, more on some of them. I don't know what the Festool filter costs. Do you have any idea, Jim? You know, I bet it's in the 60s or more. And so if you could prevent having to replace that filter, maybe ever, or at least not for a couple of years, that would be worth the investment for getting a cyclone. They come in very small sizes. We've got one here. When I first saw one of these things, forget about the bucket here. And when I first saw one of these, I said, yeah, right, that's not going to do anything. I mean, come on, this is a toy. And it looks like a toy. But I want to tell you, this is powerful. This is more powerful than anything you've ever seen when it comes to small dust collectors. And I had a discussion with Mr. Doug Pissick. See, did I get it right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easy, yeah.
Easy. This morning, we were talking and he said, I want to tell you something. He says, I never used one of these before, but I got one now and I can't believe the difference. And now I don't think he'd ever live without it, okay, in terms of working in his shop. They come in all sizes and there are a lot of manufacturers today. 2 years ago, you could only find 1 or 2 manufacturers of this kind of product. But today, you can find lots of manufacturers. Next slide. So going back up. So this cyclone he's got set up on here, this will preserve his filter life, but there's something else you can do to convert this to a HEPA system. Next slide. And that is buy a HEPA bag for your shop vac and a HEPA filter and put it in there. And you'll not have to change it. This is not something it's a one-time investment. It's going to be there for a long, long time. Couple it with a cyclone, and that's the qualifier. If you just use it by itself, you'd be changing it like any other filter you ever had in your system, or maybe should change, right? Most of us take them outside and blow them out and clean them out, shake them out, put them back in, right? But that ain't going to work with the bags. You can't do that. So couple it with a cyclone. Next slide. This is the system that I showed you earlier that's installed in my shop. And what do you read up there? What does it say? 5-year dust collection. This has been installed for 5 years and used regularly and used well. There's less than a cup of dust in that thing. I have never opened it up. I have never done anything with it. That cyclone and that barrel collects 99.999% of everything that comes through that system. And I got air leaks in those pipes. I've got air leaks in the blast gates, and it doesn't seem to affect it. And it's a very inexpensive Delta system. This is not a high-end system that you have to pay $2,000 for, right? So don't be afraid to tackle this problem. Let's go to the next slide. Now I had somebody in my house recently, and I said, well, I got to take this barrel out and put a new one in. I just rotate them. You see it's on a little carrier with wheels. And as soon as we opened this up, folks, that's shavings, that's dust. That's what did not go into my dust collector. That all was captured right from that cyclone. All of that. And this is about a month's worth of work, things I've done. You can see the shavings from the joiner and the planer. You can see the shavings that come out of the router table. You can see the dust that was collected along with all that. You need to get a cyclone. One of the things that's a side benefit to this is keeping that air clean with the air scrubber and with the cyclone. Oh my goodness, we'd be a lot healthier. We want to take care of our ears? Well, we sure want to take care of our lungs too, right? We want to be functional when we go. Next slide. Here are some of the vendors that provide this technology for you. Now, Harbor Freight, I went down and bought one as soon as it came out. $41, now not including the bucket, okay? And I tested it. And I want to tell you, it works so nice. I'm not promoting Harbor Freight. I'm just telling you for the investment, it works so nice. Centec's got a nice system. They're on Amazon. I've got reference material up here for everybody, for all these vendors. Oneida across the top has a complete set of solutions that are just amazing. But you can spend any amount of money with them that you want to, $25,000 to $50,000, and get it on down. Yes, sir. And we're right there. We're right on time. Okay. PowerTech is a sleeper. Back up. PowerTech is a sleeper. Now, this PowerTech unit, I had testimony from somebody today that said it only gets about 60 or 70% of what I have, right? This type of cyclone. You want to invest in something else. Note DeWalt. Mullet is a new kid on the block. They got a complete solution. They've got some other parts there. They're worth looking at. They're kind of pricey, but they're still worth looking at. All these things work well. Even a dust topper, which has now been upgraded to something called a Dust Topper Pro. It's got a lot more volume, a lot more capacity. I've got 2 of the dust toppers in my shop and I don't like them very much at all. In fact, the Harbor Freight Cyclone outperforms the old dust topper that I used to have or still have. Next slide. So take care of yourself, folks. Not only do we want to keep our shop clean, and I got a pretty clean shop and I don't do a lot to keep it clean because the dust collection system works for me. That and the air scrubber. Okay. Not saying I don't have to go and sweep up every once in a while. Things get that way, but still take care of yourself. Whether it's just a dust mask, the simple one like the NH or the N95s, or something a little more sophisticated, particularly if you're into turning, you guys know what the value of having all that is, right? Next slide. Here's some testimony. This was on Oneida's website, and I'll read it. It says, we have already filled a 55-gallon drum with fine dust. After checking the pan under the filter, there's virtually no dust. The cyclone really separated the dust like they claim. The other guy says, I just finished over 3 hours of 220 grit sanding on my 6x48 and was surprised to find over a quart of fines in my dust deputy. That amount would have surely fouled my fine filter partway through the project. In other words, he'd have had to go to another filter. He says, upon checking the fine, I found only a few large solids in the bottom, and I picked those up with a wand when I was cleaning the floor. There's a new film out from them. I'm not promoting Oneida. Please get me to help me understand, or please understand I'm not trying to promote them. But they're kind of the pioneers in helping us people achieve our goals with keeping our shop clean. They've got a little video out right now. Next slide. So whether you're going to go after the big stuff, the small stuff, or something in between, you want to clean the air. It's a big challenge, folks. I'm not going to minimize what it takes to do this, but it is worth every minute of your time to follow through. Don't worry about connections and gluing them. Don't worry about sealing them. That little extra airflow that goes through there because of air leaks helps the system, and it helps your dust collector, especially because sometimes the connections are smaller than they should be, and that extra air flowing through there really does help. Plus, if you got connections on your PVC pipe, it keeps that air from turbulating and dropping pieces back down into the pipe. It just helps it travel right on to its destination. Next slide. So this is something you can do.